This is German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, nicknamed the Desert Fox. He was Germany's most popular and respected general of World War II, known as the People's Marshal because he was not a part of the upper class or titled as most upper German military officers were. He was extremely close to Hitler, even appointed by the Fuhrer to head his personal foreign security. In a minor way, he helped Hitler to plan the invasion of France and then helped carry it out. And yet he disobeyed the Fuhrer's orders to fight to the death, even if it cost the death of all of his troops, even though it could have cost him his career. He also disobeyed orders to kill captured commandos caught behind enemy lines. At the same time, he was a brilliant tactician on the battlefield, winning battle after battle for the Fuhrer. Winston Churchill, speaking to Parliament, once said of Rommel, "We have a very daring and skillful opponent against us, and may I say, across the havoc of war, a great general." Johann Erwin Eugene Rommel was born on the 15th of November 1891 in Heidelheim, Germany. He was born third in a family of 5 children. Although his dad, Erwin Rommel Sr., was a provincial doctor, and his mother, Helen Lutz's father, was a prominent government official, Erwin had little interest in academics. His sister Helen said that he was a gentle and docile child. He didn't care for academics and had no interest in the university, and his dad recommended the military. At 5 foot 6 inches, he was first refused by the artillery and engineers as the military was cutting back. But at a young age, he was accepted in the infantry as an officer cadet. He remained in the military the rest of his life. In 1911, Rommel became engaged to marry Lucy Marie Molen. However, in 1913, Rommel met Walburger Stemmer, a 21-year-old fruit seller in Weingarten, where he was stationed and training army recruits. On December 8, 1913, Walburger gave birth to Rommel's daughter, Gertrude. Rommel had great affection for his daughter and wanted to start a family with Stemmer, but Germany was preparing for war. In 1914, Rommel entered World War I as a lieutenant. He will fight in France, Romania, and Italy. In September 1914, Rommel charged 3 French soldiers with a bayonet after running out of ammunition, only to be shot in the thigh, but he lived through it. In 1916, while on leave from the army, on the 27th of November, Rommel married Lucille Molen after his mother reminded him of his promise to marry her. Lucille agreed to accept his daughter Gertrude and granted visitations. Shortly after his marriage, he returned to the war, serving in Romania, when he was struck in the arm by a bullet, losing much blood and suffering from fever and severe exhaustion. The men joked when asked where the battle lines were, they would say, "Wherever Rommel is." In a 52-hour period, his unit captured 9,000 Italian prisoners in Italy. He was promoted to captain. He had developed a tactic of hitting the enemy fast and when they least expected. For 4 years, Rommel had been fighting for the Kaiser. In 1918, at the close of the war, even though Germany lost, they still maintained a skeleton army. Rommel became a military instructor for the Weimar Republic and wrote a book on infantry tactics. On December the 24th, 1928, Erwin and Lucy had a son, Manfred Rommel. He will be their only child. In 1934, when Manfred was 5, his dad met for the first time the new leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler, who had just consolidated power as the Fuhrer by becoming Chancellor and Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Hitler's intention was to secretly rebuild the German military and recognized he needed the experience that Rommel could provide. The next year, in 1935, the Fuhrer installed the draft. By this time, Rommel was a lieutenant colonel and an instructor at the Potsdam War Academy. In June 1934, Rommel traveled to the U.S. to study military tactics of Civil War General Nathan Bedford Forrest, techniques that he will later use against the British and the Americans in World War II. Forrest would have his cavalry ride out where he knew the enemy was watching and trying to determine his strength. He would ride in a square so that the enemy would think that he had more soldiers than he did. Rommel used the same tactics by running the same tanks before the British, who thought they were outnumbered and would retreat. In October 1938, the Fuhrer appointed Rommel to command the group providing security for his trip to newly acquired Czechoslovakia. Less than a year, Germany invaded Poland, bringing Great Britain and France to declare war against Germany. Rommel was promoted to Major General and given command of Hitler's field headquarters in Poland. At this stage, Rommel admired Hitler, thinking he only wanted to make Germany strong. However, as a part of Hitler's staff, in a small way, Rommel helped devise the plan for the invasion of France. In May of 1940, the invasion of Belgium and France began. Rommel was given command of the 7th Panzer Tank Division. It became known as the Ghost or Phantom Division because they moved at such speed they seemed to appear out of nowhere, a tactic used by Forrest. He played a major role in the takeover of France. He was awarded the Knight's Cross. After conquering France in 1941, he was given command of the Africa Corps. The Italian army, who was allied this time with Germany, was having a hard time in North Africa holding their own. They had suffered devastating losses against the British. Hitler ordered Rommel to Libya to assist the Italians. Rommel immediately laid siege to the port of Tobruk and maintained it from April to December 1941. After being repulsed by the British, he returned with the Africa Corps in June 1942 and retook the city. Not long after that, Rommel was promoted to the rank of Field Marshal by the Fuhrer. In a series of battles against the British 8th Army, and again using the Blitzkrieg, proved to be effective. Rommel pushed the British all the way back from Libya to the Egyptian border. Unlike other commanders, he gained fame for leading his troops from the front. He was popular with the Arab world as someone who had saved them from British rule, thus gaining the nickname the Desert Fox. Joseph Goebbels set out to make Rommel a national hero that the nation needed. Hitler knew Rommel was no threat to him as he had no interest in politics. In October 1942, the superior number of British troops halted the German advance at El Alamein, Egypt. Running low on fighting tanks, ammunition, and fuel, Rommel knew he had to retreat or lose his army. But Hitler sent a letter telling him to not give a yard of ground. Hitler said, as far as your troops go, you can show them no other road but victory or death. Although his allegiance was to the Fuhrer, he refused to obey the orders so that he could save his men, putting his career and his life in danger. During the war, he also refused to execute Allied commandos caught behind enemy lines, as he was ordered to do. He moved his forces to Tunisia, where he won a battle against the Americans and lost against the British. After a brief stint in Italy, the Field Marshal was tasked with the job of fortifying the French coast from an anticipated Allied invasion. In 1943, he was sent to inspect general defenses along the 1,600-mile Atlantic coastline, He found the defenses weak and inadequate. So Rommel began building fortifications, flooding coastal lowlands, placed miles of razor wire, mines, and steel girders along the beaches. It was Rommel's plan to station tanks close to the beachhead, so Allies could not get a foothold. "We must stop them on the beaches," he said, "or lose the war." But his superiors overruled him and moved German forces further back inland. In 1944, Hitler asked if Rommel would stay in France and defend the Atlantic Wall. He agreed to let Rommel put his plan of defense in motion that Rommel had proposed and was turned down months earlier. The Field Marshal agreed but knew it was too late. He didn't have the time to move forces up closer to the coast that his plans called for, and besides, his superiors wouldn't allow it anyway. Rommel requested permission to move the fanatical Hitler Youth Volunteers of the 12th SS Panzer Division to Carrington, where at the time was unknown by the Field Marshal, but it would have placed forces between the American landing beaches of Omaha and Utah. It would have greatly hampered the landing. Again, his superiors denied his request. In early May, Rommel issued direct orders to Major General Krauss to move his forces close to the beach. However, General Krauss helped most of his infantry battalions back from the beaches for a counterattack in direct defiance of Rommel's orders. The bloodshed of the Omaha landing was appalling. The Allies only had to face 2 battalions. Had Krauss obeyed Rommel's orders, the Allies would probably not have succeeded on Omaha Beach. On the 4th of June, intelligence told him that the weather was too bad for the Allies to land the first part of June, so he returned to Germany on the 4th. 2 days later, on June 6, 1944, the Field Marshal was home in Germany to celebrate his wife's 50th birthday, when he received a phone call informing him that the Allies had landed at Normandy. He put the phone down and said, "Normandy, how stupid of me." He quickly returned to headquarters in Normandy at the Chateau La Roche-Guyon. Once the Allied forces established a beachhead, Rommel knew that Germany would lose the war. He even wrote Hitler that he should try to negotiate a peace with the Allies so that he could have troops to fight the Russians in the east. Hitler lost confidence in Rommel after that, but still needed him because he was a good commander. On the 9th of July 1944, General von Hoffaxer arrived at Rommel's headquarters with plans for a coup against the Fuhrer. He wanted Rommel to lead negotiations with the Allies as the West respected him. Rommel did not want Hitler assassinated, but wanted him arrested and tried. However, it's believed the Field Marshal did not know the plans to kill the Fuhrer was in motion. On July the 17th, 8 days after von Hoffaxer's visit, Rommel was traveling in his staff car when a British fighter plane spotted it. He was riding in an open-top vehicle in the front seat with the driver, as he always did. The driver was killed and Rommel was severely injured. He was found unconscious and one eye closed from broken glass, with severe injuries. He was transported to the hospital. 3 days later, on the 20th, the plot to kill Hitler was in motion. It's believed that the Field Marshal had no knowledge of the details of the plot. The plan was known as Valkyrie. On July the 20th, 1944, Colonel Klaus von Strassenberg was one of the main conspirators. The plan was simple. Colonel Strassenberg would hide a bomb in his briefcase at the Fuhrer's East Prussian headquarters. He slid the bomb under the table close to Hitler, and then found an excuse to leave the meeting. When Strassenberg left the room, one of the staff officers slid the briefcase out of the way and further from the Fuhrer. The blast killed 4 staff officers and wounded 20. Hitler was wounded, but spared. When Field Marshal Rommel was able to leave the hospital, he was given permission to go home and recuperate. He'll spend time with his wife, son, and Adjutant Captain Herman Aldrich, and 2 doctors. In October 1944, while recuperating at home, Rommel received a phone call from Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel in Berlin. Keitel requested that Rommel report to Berlin for his next assignment. Rommel was unsure whether he was to receive a new assignment or be turned over to the Gestapo. He told him that he was still unable to travel. They said, "Okay, we'll come to you." Rommel told his wife after the June 20 plot that Straffenberg had blown it, and a front-line soldier would have finished Hitler off. On October the 14th, 1944, Field Marshal Rommel's 15-year-old son Manfred was serving on an aircraft gun emplacement near his home. He gained permission to stay with his dad as he recuperated. Manfred said he arrived at home around 7 a.m. and his dad was having breakfast and he joined him. After breakfast, I went a short walk with my dad, he said. His dad told him that the Nazis were sending 2 generals at noon. "We knew our home was being watched," he said, "and we were under suspicion. My dad's chief of staff and his commanding officer had both been executed under Hitler's orders for their part in the plot. My dad's hope was that the Fuhrer would realize he needed his greatest commander and assign him to the Eastern Front. What the Field Marshal didn't know was that his name had been mentioned during torture sessions with the Gestapo, and that Martin Bormann had informed Hitler. Hitler wanted to get rid of Rommel, but the problem was Rommel was a hero to the German people. And if people thought their greatest and most honored military leader was willing to plot against the Fuhrer, there must have been a good reason. Manfred stated that the only ones at home that day was his mother, Captain Aldinger, his dad's military aide, and a wounded war veteran that assisted the captain. Captain Aldinger was also a friend of the Field Marshals. They had fought together back in World War I. He kept him on his staff all those years. Aldinger helped Rommel into his Afrika Korps uniform to face his expected visitors. Around 12 noon that same day on October 14, 1944, a car with Berlin plates was dispatched to the Field Marshal's home in Harrington. The driver, SS Sergeant Dosser, opened the car door for General Bergdorf and General Marshal, who walked to the front door. They asked to see the Field Marshal. They were most courteous and asked to see him in private. Manfred stated years later, "They didn't arrest him, so we thought that was good and maybe it would be okay." The generals told the Field Marshal that Hitler had ordered them to bring 3 proposals to him. First, he could come to Berlin and plead his case before the Fuhrer, but he was warned Hitler had already issued execution orders. Second, he could go to the People's Court and plead his case. Also, he was advised the court always ruled the same as the Fuhrer. In case the Fuhrer Marshal decided to take either of the first 2 proposals, the government could not guarantee the security of his family, and they would probably end up in a concentration camp or worse. They would also arrest what was left of his staff, including his aide Captain Aldinger, and he would most likely be executed. Or he could take his own life by taking cyanide, and they had brought along a glass vial that he would simply break by chewing down with his teeth. The Field Marshal asked that he be able to talk with his family. They gave their permission. He first went to his wife's bedroom to speak to her. He told her they had promised to keep her and Manfred safe and would guarantee her his Field Marshal's retirement pension. He'd be given a state funeral and buried as a national hero that died from his war injuries. The German people didn't learn the truth about the Field Marshal's death until after the war in 1947, when his wife told what really happened. When Rommel left his wife crying in her bedroom, he told his son in military aid what he was going to do. He said, "I will soon be dead." Manfred wanted to fight. The Field Marshal said no, they have troops waiting, and they will kill everyone. The troops were parked waiting on this road if Rommel decided to fight. At 1 p.m., the driver pulled the car to the back of the house so that neighbors could not see the Field Marshal leave. The two generals shook hands and saluted the Field Marshal. He had dressed in full military uniform, but had been in civilian clothes that morning when he had a picture with his wife and son taken. The car pulled out of the driveway slowly and only went a little ways down the road out of the sight of the house where they pulled over, where later a monument will be placed. The driver and General Marshal will get out. General Wilhelm Bergdorf handed the Field Marshal a vial of cyanide. He placed it in his mouth and crunched the vial. Within minutes, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was dead. The three men then drove to a nearby field hospital and telephoned his widow that her husband was dead. The Field Marshal's body was quickly cremated so that an autopsy could not discover cyanide. True to the agreement, the government gave General Rommel a state funeral with full military honors and declared him a military hero that gave his life in support of the Hitler regime. On the 2nd of May 1945, General Bergdorf, that he give the vial of cyanide to the Field Marshal, will himself commit suicide by gunshot while in the Hitler bunker 2 days after Hitler committed suicide. General Ernst Marshal was released from captivity in 1947. He died in Bavaria in 1978 at the age of 82. Captain Hermann Aldinger, the military aide who had helped Field Marshal Rommel into his leather coat for the last time, survived the war and died in 1993 in Munich at the age of 86. The Field Marshal's wife, Frau Lucy Marie Rommel, passed away on the 26th of December 1971 at the age of 77. She's buried next to her husband's remains. Manfred Rommel will become mayor of Stuttgart. He will pass away on November the 7th, 2013, at the age of 84. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had served under 3 German governments. He never joined the Nazi Party. He was 52 years old.